Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and on the factory floor with me today, I've got Mr. Howard Loring. Welcome to the podcast.
Very exciting.
Sounds great. Which timeline do you think we're in right now?
Well, we're present, but we're soon to be in the past. But when they watch, it'll be in their future. So.
Right. And I don't even know if it's a shared future or if we're splitting or if we're in the multiverse or what's going on. I think we could talk a lot about that good stuff because I know time travel is central to your writing, as is what you call the epic fable. And we can talk about all that good stuff.
Yes, sir.
You're the author of Tales of the Elastic Limit. We're eager to hear about that. And you've been anthologized for several years. I'm holding it up for viewers, and if you're just on audio, I had the privilege of being part of the 2026 sci-fi anthology that's put together by the other science fiction author, S.A. Gibson.
Yes.
I met Steve at LA Comic-Con just this year. He was wandering around. He gave me his card. He said, "You're a science fiction writer here. You want to be in my anthology? Hit me up." So I sent him the short story, and I got in there, and that's how I met you, Howard.
Yes. Well, I've never met Steve, but I've had extensive, back and forth with him, emails. And
great. How did you first reach him? I'm sure a lot of our listeners, viewers, they're up and coming or indie sci-fi writers. People are curious how you get published, how you get your name out there.
Right.
How did you get in touch with Steve? Because he's been doing this for several years now.
Well, he started in 2021, and I was late. I didn't submit that year, and I've submitted each year since. They take 2 submissions a year. They've taken each of my submissions. I had a couple of short stories on the Unknown Tales podcast, which is where they read them, and it's one of the top 25 podcasts at the time on the internet, and so Steve contacted me, is the way I understand it. We were in the same. We're in this. Oh no! It was Mark. It was Mark Neffler, who also writes. We were in a couple of the same groups online, and he recommended that I put in for the anthology. I was late the first year, as I said, so that's how I got into it. But I have written 2 novels and a book of short stories, and I write not only time travel, but or epic fables, which we can talk about, but they're historical fiction as well. And one of my novels I just learned a month ago from the president of the National Federation of Music Clubs, that one of my books has been approved for study by the Federation, and there's thousands of affiliate clubs all over the nation, because the book has extensive it covers 19th century German classical musicians. It's got both the Schumanns, he and his wife. She was much more famous than he was during his lifetime. It's got Brahms. Her father was the best known music teacher in Europe. Everybody acknowledged that. Mendelssohn is in it a couple of times. Beethoven's discussed. Schubert is mentioned, I think. Anyway, so, and I use real history. I don't change the facts, or if I alter them in any way, I always have a book of notes at the end that clarifies things. So, that's pretty gratifying.
Well, good for you. Congratulations. As we both know, it's tough getting attention in this attention-focused, attention-starved media information landscape. So if you get accolades, you get recognized, you get integrated even in an educational kind of program, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do my own marketing, and it's feeble, but I keep getting there. I've got trailers, and I've got an extensive YouTube footprint, where I like train a dinosaur, or I fix my time machine, or I transport busloads of people on city buses back to the past and then bring them safely into the current reality. Uh, and so, yeah, if you go to YouTube, you'll see five.
We'll put the link in the description for everybody
Right.
so they could have
Well,
it.
what I'm saying is you'll see like five of them, but if you keep scrolling, there's dozens of them. So, anyway.
And what do you use to create that kind of marketing storytelling? Do you use AI to do the
No,
visuals?
I don't even know what that is. I write books where the machinery does astounding, unbelievable stuff, and I can't even work a computer halfway. So no, I don't do any.
So how do you? It's on YouTube. They're videos,
I
right?
post them.
Yeah, I know. But what's the video experience like if you're not using technology?
Oh well, I had an app on my Mac where I could make movies. So I'd have like on the bus. Uh, I had a friend that was the head of the arts council, and she had three or four buses, and they sold. It was a fundraising thing. They sold passports, and so the buses would go around to different venues that had something to do with the arts, and they'd get off and have their passport stamped, and then they'd go to the next place. And as the day progressed, the evening, they all got drunk as could be. So I had this friend, and she said, "Look, I got these things on the buses. I got a juggler, and I got a this or that. Somebody's going to be reading something." And one of the guys fell through. "Can you help me out?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll play guitar and sing and transport people back in time." And she said, "Can you do that on a bus?" And I said, "We'll see." So I did it and had a blast. And the next year I didn't do it because she had other arrangements. And people came up to her and said, "Where is that crazy guy that was doing all this stuff?" So the next year I did it again. And the first time I published, it's an hour long. I don't know how long. It's long, the whole thing that I had edited down. The second time, I made like dozens of little clips from the entire experience. And so you start out, it's daylight, you end up, it's night, and lights are going by on the outside of the bus. And plus, I write with a pen name, and nobody knows who I am, or at least at that time was my feeble, attempt at shtick. So my face is not in the thing, but it's just they're hilarious. And so I just edited them on my machine and put them up on YouTube.
Who shot the video?
Oh, I had different people. It depends on what the video is. Sometimes I shoot them when I inspect my time machines or train dinosaurs or something like that. Other times I just had friends do them, or yeah, I just come by I went to the library and asked for my book and filmed that. They weren't too happy about that. So anyway, I got my book out of the library and left, and they were like, it was under duress. It was almost like I had to sneak it. Uh, so yeah, I don't
So
know.
tell us about your time obsession. It seems to be a recurring motif
Well,
in one form or another.
no, I'm an artist, and I've been an artist all my adult life, and I do all kinds of things. I'm a sculptor. I paint. I act. I'm a musician. I've been in all kinds of bands and stuff, and I got the ringing ears to prove it. And so I always said I was going to write a book, and a lot of people say that, but a lot of people, they just say it. So I was stuck not on writing the book because I'm very well read, and I may not know how to write, but I can spot bad writing. So my theory was I was going to write a book and then fix it because I'm sure it would have long run-on sentences. I was unconcerned about the grammar. I just wanted the story down. I wanted to know as an artist, and I'm a good storyteller, and I'm well read in terms of mythology and the unspoken, the unconscious ability to use myth in storytelling because it makes the leaps for you. If you use standardized things that everybody can relate to, then you don't have to put them in context because the myth does that for you. So you don't have to know that. Uh, in other words, if you're going to write something that's horrible, Oh, what's the worst thing? Well, say a lost child is horrible. Okay, but a lost girl child is more horrible because society would deem women inferior or whatever, in terms of history. I'm talking about, not me. And so, okay, but you could get even better than that because society values children. If something happened to a child, people would be involved unless she was an orphan. Okay, then she's really up the creek because she's a small girl child orphan. Okay, well, little orphan Annie. Okay, Goldilocks with the three bears. Okay, Princess Leia. They are all orphans. You don't have to be told that they're in a world of doo doo because you already know through the unconscious, the way you were brought up, your culture, that this is the case. Another thing with myth, numbers are very important. You can't have one character. It's boring. You can't have two characters. That's boring. Boy gets girl or boy loses girl. Yawn. I'm going to sleep. I'm not reading that. But if you have three characters, you have infinite variety. You've got the hero and the girl. You got the girl and the bad guy. You got the bad guy and the hero. So each character has three things. So, and other numbers are. It's a formula. You plug it in. Have you ever seen a movie or a TV show or a play, and the acting was fine, the pictures were good, but it did not make it for you? Something was missing. It was just not didn't make a connection. And chances are they've misplaced the myth. The numbers are wrong, and they don't resolve, and you're left, and you don't even know why. And
Well, to me, problems in film and writing, and sometimes especially in science fiction and fantasy, is that they focus on world building and
I
ideas
agree.
instead of the characters. And usually, what works is you put a character into a situation. Their goals are clearly defined. They want something, they need something, and then they've got obstacles. And then as they negotiate through those obstacles in one form or another, they either attain their goal or they don't. And the emergent interaction between the character and their obstacles is the drama.
Yes, but that follows the formula. If it works, you've employed terrific myth. In other words, I'm a good storyteller because I know the elements. It's natural to me. I hadn't studied. Myth is not some ivy a tower and some egghead figuring out what myth was. Written language has been around for like 10 or 12,000 years. And okay, but language has been around infinitely longer than that. And people sat around campfires and they talked about, the hunt that day or the this or that, and a lot of do. And, people knew through trial and error what made a good story. And if you have at least three characters as opposed to, this guy over here who went out and hit a deer on the head, that's a boring story. Who cares about that? You want to hear about him breaking his foot in the thing and fighting off people and, da. So the Homer is considered a big deal, even though it probably wasn't one man, not because he invented storytelling, but because he knew the rules and put them down before anybody else did. So his stories follow. There's a best formula that's been arrived through time, through trial and error. And if you look at it, Joseph Campbell analyzed it. That's one way to look at it. The hero myth, and you have the gesture, and you have the to do, and the parts fit together in certain ways, and it's unconscious. You can creep people out, and they won't know why, or hopefully you can intrigue them. And I write epic fables. They are fables. They are simple. They are page turning. They're simple, and people relate because I use myth. And if you use it right, you're not even aware of it. You don't have to be aware of it. but they're also epics because they're layered, especially the novels. They're layered like onions. And, I write disjointed things. I have a story, and then I have another story, and they're different, and another story, and it's different. Nothing connects. And then they start to connect. And you're 3/4 of the way through the book before you even know what's happening. And you're engaged by that time. You're enthralled and want to know if they're going to be able to do what they're trying to do. And it's got real history, so it's interesting from another point of view. Time travel aficionados, they are rabid. They will pick you apart if you don't have a good time machine or if your theory has holes in it. And although in my books the machine's breaking down, they have to figure it out. But the time travel aficionados who don't read, say, historical fiction, they're blown away by the fiction because it's not hitting them over the head. It's not a bunch of numbers, dates, this happened, that. The characters are immersed in a period of history. And in my books, different types of history intertwine. And they're all looking for the same thing. It's all time travel, but time travel is just an element, although you have to cross your T's and dot your I's. And, like my theories, the way I implement it, I can explain paradox, which is a big bugaboo in time travel. Okay. And, but that's not the point. The point is universal. There are epics in nature. A short story is a contained piece. It's a little thing. I write short stories. You write short stories. Okay. A novel is bigger because it has character development and it has a more intricate plot. But in an epic, the plot is secondary. That's not the important thing, is the plot, because it's universal. Everybody's been at the end of their rope. Everybody's lost in love. Everybody hates their job. So it relates in way. So the plot is secondary. It's not what happens. It's not what the characters do. It's who the characters become. And because it's universal, everyone can relate to it because it uses strings, hooks that draw you in. And if you use myth correctly, it draws you in subconsciously. You don't know why you feel this way. You don't know why you're pulling for this bad guy or, whatever the plot is. And so they're epic in nature, but they're simply told. And, this is easier done in a novel, but in my book of short stories, I've got a book of 12 short stories. They're each a contained piece. You can read them in any order, 1 through 12. But if you read them in order, it tells the bigger story. It tells the history of humanity, but time is linear. So you can read the book backwards by reading the last chapter first and going in the reverse order. It's the same story, just from another perspective. And you can't do that without time. So that's, why I take. Now the reason
why time though? You could, if you're upset about myth,
yes,
and you have different angles of attack. You could focus on the hero's journey. You could focus on the double mother of Jung. You could focus on the risen dead of Osiris. The list is long in terms of pursuing these thematic archetypes. But again, time travel seems to be a focus, and I'm just curious why you're using that one of all the tools at your disposal
well,
as a narrative device.
I got off on a tangent. I was going to answer that earlier. Okay, I'm an artist, and I always wanted to write a book, but the question was not writing the book. The question was, what are you going to write? So I lived out in the country, out in the middle of nowhere, and I had felled a tree one day and cut it into rounds, and it was cold. There were no leaves on the trees, And this was like 2 rises over from my tiny little house. I lived alone in the woods, and so I went out in the morning to split these rounds. And I had like 6 dogs with me. They were excited. Oh boy, something's happening. So I went out there and started splitting these rounds. So I took my jacket off. I got one. Then I took my sweater off. Then I took my thing. So in a half an hour, I was down to my shirt sleeve, even though it was chilly. And I took a break. I leaned back on my axe, and I looked around. And all the dogs by this time were bored, so they were just laying around in the leaves. And I looked around. It was quiet. There was no airplanes. There was no squirrels running around. There was no birds in the tree. And I looked around and I said, this must have been what it was like at caveman time. And then I said, what would happen if a caveman walked, over that rise there? Then I said, what would it mean if a caveman walked over that rise there? So I went back in the house and I wrote a story about a man, and I quickly changed it from splitting wood to digging a hole. And he was looking for something in this hole. Okay. And he meets he meets a caveman. Okay. So it was a pretty nifty little story, and it had a little twist at the end, like an O. Henry thing. And so I said, well, that's pretty weird. What does that mean? So I said, I wrote another story. I wrote a story of a guy, instead of he was in a forest digging a hole, he was in a desert. And he was looking for something. He was looking for a place, and he finds it. Okay. So then and it had a weird little thing twist at the end. I said, well, that's an interesting thing. What does that mean? I had 2 stories about 2 guys. So I wrote a story with 2 women, and it was in a different time frame. Okay. And they were looking for something, and they found it. Everybody finds it. I didn't know what it was, but they knew what it was. So then I go back to the first story, and I start giving them jargon. And they're all talking about the same thing. I didn't know what it was, but they knew what it was. So I ought to do. So I've written two novels and this book of short stories, and I've never written an outline. I just get a weird idea. What would it be like if a caveman walked over the hill? And I got a novel out of that. And, so then I had a novel. And when I first started out, I wasn't going to, publishing was not on the horizon. I didn't care. I just wanted to, from an artist point of view, know if I could do it. So I would farm out little pieces of it here and there, read it to people. And then I had this one friend, she kept saying, how come you're giving this stuff to everybody and you're not giving it to me? I said, well, when it's done, I'll give it to you. So I gave it to her when I had the end on it, and it still had run-on sentences and stuff. I said, here, I'm going to fix this, but this is it. So, she worked for a living. She called me for 4 or 5 nights, however long it took her to get through it. And she was asking all the right questions. She was getting through it, working her way through all the right questions. Then when she finished it, she called me up. She said, "You dog," So then my friends pushed me to publish it. So I did, because you could do it for free on Amazon or whatnot. So then they wanted a sequel. Well, I didn't want to write a sequel. That's too conventional for me. I need something creative. So I wrote another story. This is the one with the musicians in it. And again, it has 3 separate things. There's Julius Caesar. Everybody knows who Caesar was. Excuse me. He was a great politician. He was a massive military genius. Okay. Caesar wins the Roman Civil War, goes back to Rome, and he gets murdered. Okay. So then I'm looking around for some other kind of big thing in history. So I know a lot about Europe, Elizabethan times. So I wrote about Christopher Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe was a literary genius. He wrote all kinds of plays, he wrote essays, he wrote books, and he was murdered just like Caesar. Ooh, this is pretty interesting, okay? This has got something going here, you know? So I needed somebody else. I had a thing on Caesar, I had a thing on Marlowe. I called up my mother, who was at the time, she was alive at the time. She was a professionally trained classical musician. She taught music for 51 years, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Went to the American Conservatory of Music in Chicago on a full scholarship and finished in 3 years. So she could spit on Juilliard people. Okay, so I called her up. I said, Mom, I got this thing on Caesar, I got this thing on Marlowe. I need a classical musician who was murdered. And she said, I'll call you right back. You know, let me think about it. So I got up from my desk and I went over and poured some coffee in the kitchen. It hadn't been 30 seconds. The phone rang. And I went back and she said, Schumann, you know. And I said, was he murdered? No, but he died in an insane asylum. And I said, I can work with that. Okay. So, you know, again, it's the time travel apparatus, the theory is the same, and it's explained in every book. It's not heady. It's simple. They're all fables. So the second book is not a sequel. It's a standalone, but it's all about the same people and the same. You don't know they're the same people, but it's all about the same theory, the same hardware. Okay, so then after that, really, I wrote the second one because I wanted to see if I'd learned anything. That's what an artist does: is strive and try to control his media. Okay, so the first book is, I don't know, 375 pages. The second book's only 250. So I was getting better at what I was trying to do. So from a creative standpoint, that's good, you know. So now I wanted to write something else, but I didn't want a sequel. I didn't want to do, you know, I wanted them to stand alone. And I'd never written short stories. So I wrote some short stories. And see, if you write historical fiction, then your palette is endless. You know, it's just because you can go to prehistory too. I've written about the invention of the wheel. I've written about the invention of writing. I've written about agriculture.
Let's talk for a second about, you know, your shorter pieces. I'm familiar with your two shorter pieces from the anthology that we both appear in.
Yes.
So S.A. Gibson's
Yeah.
anthology, and you have a particular style.
I write
And maybe you can talk a little bit about the style. So it seems to be in this kind of epic fable style. And what I got out of it, it's heavily dialogue driven
Yes.
and expository in the sense that between the dialogue and the narration, you're kind of telling the reader what's going on. Now, I'm assuming that's a conscious
Yeah.
style that you've adopted and it fits your epic fable format. Why did you choose that kind of way of writing, which is again it's very dialogue heavy, so the characters are explaining what's going on and you're describing the situation. And you're also pedagogical in the sense where you're taking a moment of history, and with this time travel mechanism, in a sense, someone is coming from the future or from some other place to educate the folks who are there now and teach them something. So, in one of your short stories, it's literally writing and communication, going from phonetics, like almost cuneiform hieroglyphs, to composite words.
Yes.
And it seems to be like, well, you know, our ability to communicate and write came from this other place via time travel. Do I have that more or less right in terms of how you write and one of the recurring themes of your writing?
Well, the themes are different. In the first book, they discover a time machine and they try to use it and they explode time. Time explodes. And so they have to have a mission to go and figure out what's happening and hopefully fix it. Okay. In the second mission, in the second book, there's a guy who's, and he's got an assistant, and, there's a whole plot, but he's visiting with people because he needs something from them. Okay. And you find out that he has a quest. Okay. And that's, the problem is time has exploded. So the three books I've written, you can read them in any order, and how you read them is how you understand how they're connected. You say, oh man, this is the guy in the second book.
What I'm trying to get at, though, Howard, for our listeners and viewers, there's different styles of writing.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a style of writing where you just kind of set characters loose, they interact with the world and the people who are fighting them, and it just kind of plays out. Okay. So it's driven by drama, and it's kind of emergent and organic based on plot elements. And your style is different from that, in a sense where you're putting characters into a situation and there's a lot of dialogue,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of description. Now, I'm not creating a hierarchy here. I'm just trying to understand your style, why you chose it, and how it ties to some of your themes, which include a lot of time travel and this kind of archetypal basis on mythology.
Well, here's the thing. When I sat down and started to write, I didn't have an outline, but I had a guideline because I read a lot and I have a very interesting background in terms of education and experience. And so I knew I wasn't Tolstoy, and I knew I wasn't like Hemingway. So I did have guidelines that were self-imposed. I wanted it to be simple. So I've read pretty much everything Edgar Rice Burroughs ever wrote. He wrote lots of Princess of Mars novels and John Carter of Mars, and he wrote a Venetian series. But he wrote Tarzan. And Tarzan short stories are very quick. The chapters are a page and a half. Tarzan's walking around, he sees people in his domain, and this he climbs a tree to see better, and the snake jumps on him, and that's the end of the chapter. You turn the chapter, Tarzan dives in the river, and the snake lets go. And he crawls up, and he's looking through the grass. The people in his domain have guns, and the lion jumps on him. Okay, so it's another page and a half. So the it's quick, and it's built on stages. Okay, so I wanted a quick read. Then I wanted something with an O. Henry ending, where you're going down and you're saying, this is what's happening, and then it goes like this. Okay, that's O. Henry. Okay, that keeps the excitement up. It keeps the intrigue up. Okay, so then I said I needed to have, like Dickens, a beginning and a middle and an end. Dickens sold very few novels in his lifetime. He sold through the penny papers. His stuff was serialized. That's how people knew him, and every week the beggars would beg the people that bought the penny papers to read it to them on the sidewalks. Okay, so each of Dickens's chapters have a beginning and a middle and an end. They're like little books in themselves. So those are the three things I held myself to. And other than that, in other words, they have to be a quick read. They have to have a O. Henry. Each chapter has to, like, you understand, and then you don't understand. It's like, what? And then the third thing is each chapter has a beginning and a middle and an end. And of course, you have to do that with a short story as well. Okay, so that's that's what I held myself to, and my style came about as I was paring down everything. I wanted it simple. There's very little description. I do describe things, but there's very little. I don't describe the spacecraft. I don't describe the uniforms. I don't care about that. That's for the reader to plug in, and that makes it more infinite. And I found my voice about the second rewrite of the first book when I went back through it and was trying to correct for grammar and things like that. Excuse me. And other words, aside from that, it's just wordplay. It's just never. My main thing is never bore your reader. Never, can't take for granted that they understand where you're coming from. They have to know what's happening, and you got to leave them wanting more and not bore them. And that may be a fine line. That's where the word comes in. And how well you use how well the different elements blend together. That defines your art, and that's for others to judge. I can only do as well as I think I can. And,
All right. And speaking of that, how do you mentioned you market your own
try.
books? So are all your books self-published
Yes,
then from
yes.
okay. And
Except for
then
the
what do you do?
except for the 5 anthologies.
Well, you're contributing to a collection that
Yeah,
someone
exactly.
else is doing,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
like Gibson, right? So what else are you doing? You got your YouTube channel with your videos,
Yes.
and then what
Well,
other avenues?
I've written several blogs. I haven't done one in a while. I've got a website, and there's a book section, of course, and there's a free stuff page. So I was in a group with a man named Dr. Jeff Robinson, and he had a podcast, Untold Tales, which I said was, and he wrote the books, the short stories, and he had a woman produce them who's a nationally known voice artist, Melissa Del Toro Schaffner, and she does national commercials. She does all kinds of internet video stuff, and she's in high demand. So he asked me. At the time there were like 85 of them, and he said, I need some more material. Do you have some stuff? So I sent him a couple of short stories, and he said, ooh, you got any more? So after a while, they had produced, that is, she read my short stories, and they're 17-inch minutes, they're 32 minutes, and about 5 or 6 of them. And one of them, The Clash of the Redheads, at the time there was like 100 of them then. There's 200 of them now. The Clash of the Redheads was the most listened to out of all the short stories on the podcast. So they interviewed me, and they had interviewed me prior with a bunch of other authors. And so on my page, my free stuff page, you can hear these short stories for free. And you can also read some of my stories for free. And you can listen to interviews that I've done.
What are you doing proactively to get attention out there, to get people to see your content? You collaborated on this science fiction book, which gets us out there, which is
Yes.
cool. But are you doing any kind of social media
Yes.
advertising,
Yes.
engaging with the world to get people interested?
Yes, I have. I'm on maybe 35 groups on Facebook. I'm on historical fiction groups. I'm on writing groups. I'm on sci-fi groups. I'm on time travel groups. I'm on history groups. Excuse me. And, what you do, what I have done, what I did, excuse me, is for a year or so, I didn't even talk about my stuff. I just engaged in discussions and I became a known entity within the group. And then what I do weekly is I post to these groups. It's either the books or the anthologies. And also, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 groups there. Same thing, writers groups, whatever. And so, yeah, I don't want to oversaturate. Uh, so I post once a week. And I have had, I have trailers for the books, and every chance I get, I push them towards the website, which has all manner of stuff. It explains what an epic fable is. It explains, and gives free examples of the work. And I also have a blog, which is on the website as well. So, I get besieged every week. I must have 50 people trying to market my stuff. And, I'm not after a bigger number of hits. My metric is sales. And over the years, I have paid professionals, quote unquote, and, they're no better than I am. So I do it myself.
All right, so it sounds like it's earned media, what they say. So you're participating in all these groups, discussions, you've got a presence there in all these different categories. And then every once in a while, you'll send people to your website. They're curious about your writing, and then you engage communities that way.
Yes. And I'm very, I'm trying to figure out the best way to market this news about my book and the music federation, because that's a big thing. They've got thousands of chapters across the country. And they've said that it's good enough to study because it's got these classical musicians in. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get them to market it for me.
Right. How did you do the research for that research intensive book?
Well, here's the thing. I knew that Caesar had won the Civil War with Pompey the Great at the Battle of Munda, which is in Iberia, which is in Spain, on a big plain out in the middle of nowhere in Spain. So I just had him meet time travelers there while he was on campaign. Okay, then he goes back to Rome and gets murdered straight away, So Marlowe, I knew a lot about Marlowe because I know a lot about Elizabethan history. And most scholars believe that Marlowe was also a spy.
How did you research? Did you use Google? Did you go to books? Did you use AI? What did you do to get information about these people?
Well, I do have to research dates. I'm good on history, but I'm not precise on dates. And I use Google for that primarily. And I used this book on Marlowe because Brahms wrote letters. They let him see uh, Schumann at the institution at the end, and the letters were later published. So that book was invaluable for research on Brahms. We know exactly who his doctors were and what the therapy they had working on him and what his symptoms were, etc. So mostly I get my ideas because of stuff I already know, stuff that I'm interested in, stuff that feeds me, and then I try to make it accessible and interesting to other people using these various other things. Time travel being one, but they're mystery stories, they're detective tales, they're whodunits, they're love stories, uh, and time travel. And so the short stories on my computer were like 100 pages. So my first novel was 375. My second was 250, 100 pages. I was getting better at what I was wanting to do. which is convey universal concepts through very simply told stories. So in my books, people have to make decisions, and the decisions they make have consequences. And so the type of things they're going through, other people go through, and can relate to. That's my hope, at least. And so far, it's panned out. So that's all I can tell you.
Well, that's great. Well, it's my pleasure to help get the word out for you as best I
Well,
can.
thank you. I appreciate it.
And we'll put links in the description of your website and sources and where to find you.
All right.
And it's been fun collaborating on the 2026 sci-fi anthology.
Well,
so both you have two stories in it. I have one. I submitted two stories, but they were both long.
yeah.
And I heard back from Steve that they're too long, so they're going to pick one.
Yeah.
And then they picked the one that I guess they like more.
Well, I'll tell you what, after I read your story, then maybe we could talk again. Maybe not on a podcast, but and then we can I just haven't read any of your stuff. I'm sure if it.
That's all right. That's no big deal. Most guests haven't. So it's like my role is a podcaster and host.
Yeah.
And bonus brownie points if there's any familiarity with what I do. But I try to showcase the talents and the work of the people who are guests rather than my own stuff. Sometimes we talk about my own stuff, but it's within the context of what they're doing.
Right. Well, how do you come up with your story?
My story is a multiverse focused story. I've always been obsessed with the multiverse ever since I was a kid. And I wrote a bunch of stuff and I didn't like it because I was focused on the thing rather than the characters.
Right.
And then I had an epiphany, which is actually this story seeded my debut novel for a hustler who gets the idea that there are multiple universes in a multiverse.
Yes.
And then he realizes that he could turn it into a genie's lamp, because if there's an infinite number of universes, every possibility plays itself out. So if he could hustle people into thinking that he can make a device that'll send you to a universe where everything is the same except your dreams happen to be coming true, then that's his new scam. And that became the foundation for the novel.
That's very interesting. He chooses one of the two classical views of time travel. So that's the view that time is a river, or it's a corridor with a bunch of doors. And no matter which route you take, there are more corridors, or there are more doors, or there are more fingers of the river. Okay, that's one view. Another view is time is a loaf of bread, and it's sliced into present, 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 present. And if you want to time travel, you take this piece of bread and you move it in the loaf to this piece of bread. Okay, so a lot of time travel stories that don't work is because they mix the two definitions.
Mine is the Max Tegmark level 4 multiverse. So it's there's a mathematical or logical backbone to the universe, and really we're in a sense living in a simulation. It could be an organic simulation. It's not necessarily created by aliens, but the backbone of reality itself is like Stephen Wolfram's Rulliad. So it's based on logic and computational kind of function. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's the backdrop. So what happens in that kind of multiverse, I call it the infiniverse, is every permutation is expressed. We happen to live in a universe where the natural laws enable our existence.
Yes.
But there's an infinite number of these because it's spinning dials for natural law, for number of dimensions, for every variable that went into this universe. There's infinite permutations of every possibility.
Yes.
So that's the backdrop. So time travel is basically this ability to jump between these isolated universes within this multiverse or infiniverse, where everything that has ever happened is happening now and will happen in the future. It's an eternal instant. and it's an infinitely large, infinitesimal space all at once.
Yeah.
So within that, time travel becomes kind of a natural extension of that. And I play with that in the book
Well,
where the
I
characters
can't,
jump and
I can't wait to read it. So, in my book, all my books have the elastic limit in the title, and that's because in my theory, you have to understand what the elastic limit is in order to manipulate it, because it, with the machine, allows you to manipulate the elastic limit. So, in the first book, the limit is breached and time explodes, and uh, but it's also a metaphor for your imagination. So the first book is beyond the elastic limit. It's beyond your imagination. This one we were talking about with the musicians, called piercing the elastic limit. It blows your imagination away.
that's good that you bring that up because that's what I learned. In my earlier writing, I was focused on the mechanism of this thing, and I created kind of cardboard cutout characters who would tell that and experience
Yeah,
it. And I discovered that you need a compelling hero or anti-hero, and you throw them into the mix, and they happen to be in this multiverse, and they happen to try to take advantage of
yeah,
it. And I like that sentiment that you bring up that metaphorically and emotionally, if this is true in any kind of way, then it opens up infinite possibilities. And we realize as people, even though we feel life is finite and that choices are limited, that we create the universe as we go through it.
yeah.
And that's an interesting theme that underlies a lot of how the characters view themselves and the situation.
Well, it's most interesting. I will jump on that and read it.
So the short story is the seed of that novel, and then I translated that short story into the 140,000 word novel
Yeah.
that I published this year, and it's the first in a series. I'm going to keep going because
Well,
the adventures
there
continue.
you go. Never stop. Never stop.
Yeah,
People ask me what it takes to be a writer, and a lot of people have ideas. Ideas are great, but and until you have it down on a computer, on a piece of paper, you can't alter it, you can't change it, you can't move it around. And so I tell people that want to write is to put pen to paper, or click that computer key. Uh, you can have ideas all day long. A lot of people say they're going to write a lot of
that's
people
exactly
say
right.
they're going to write a book.
If you're a writer, you don't even have to be popular or be even formally published, but if you live it and do it every day, then you're that thing.
Yes,
And to your point, without that there's nothing. You need content both to feed off of for yourself and also just let it out there into the world.
yeah,
That's what we do.
yes, yes. I agree.
Well, it's cool having you on.
I really
I
enjoyed
shouldn't say congratulations because this is your fourth time at the anthology
it.
rodeo, and
Yes,
you've been published elsewhere. It's the fifth time.
yes.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. So I guess I popped my cherry on that
Yeah, well,
this year.
that's all right.
Yeah.
I congratulate you. A lot of people through the years, the anthology has grown. Last year was the biggest year yet, and this year had 4 times the pre-sales. So I congratulate you on getting in. A lot of people are, and I'm an administrator for the group uh, for the science fiction novelists, which means I just get the emails. I don't do anything. Other people okay the memberships and whatnot, but people are asking to be admitted to the club left and right. So the fact that you submitted and were accepted, congratulations.
Well, thanks. I even got a little kudos in the review on Amazon. Baby A in a stormtrooper outfit called out my
Well,
story, so I
excellent,
thought that was nice.
excellent.
Well, I appreciate it. Spread the word. I really enjoy the podcasting, which is helping other people.
Well, I'm going to put it all over my social network.
Yeah, let folks know that I'll be happy to talk to folks and continue the conversation and share the enthusiasm of being a creator. And to your point, it's challenging. There's a lot of things that get in the way, both internal and external. And if you just have the dedication and that energy and vision, then you just do it.
Right.
And if you fill that page, then it's mission accomplished.
I agree. I agree. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I've enjoyed myself.
Thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, check out Howard. We got the links and description in the notes. And like, comment, and share, and spread the word. Indie authorship is thriving. Science fiction is hot. You got the Project Hail Mary movie out for another big blockbuster that everybody's talking about. And you don't get an Andy Weir without people like us and Andy who start from scratch,
Right.
which is doing your best shot. You build your following, and you never know what can happen. And it doesn't even matter what happens as long as you keep doing what you love.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
It's all in the art.
Thanks so much.
All right.